The laughter reached Talia Reeves before the words did, sharp and bright, and aimed directly at her back. "That dress is doing a lot of work," one of the women said, just loud enough to carry across the ballroom floor, her champagne glass tilted toward Talia like a weapon. Someone should tell her a gala isn't the place to test how much fabric can stretch. Talia did not turn around immediately. She smoothed the deep red silk over her hip, felt the fabric settle exactly where she had chosen it to fall, and only then did she look over her shoulder at the cluster of women in pastel gowns who had clearly been waiting for her to react. "I'll be sure to pass that along to my tailor," Talia said, calm and even, "since she clearly outdressed everyone in this room tonight." The woman's smile faltered, just slightly, before she recovered with a practiced laugh and turned back to her circle. Talia let out a slow breath and continued toward the bar, chin level, shoulders back, refusing to give the room the satisfaction of watching her shrink. She was 26 years old, a forensic auditor for a firm that specialized in untangling corporate fraud, and she had been invited to this gala tonight because her firm had just closed a multi-million-dollar investigation into a shipping conglomerate's books, work that had taken her 14 months and had made her, briefly, the most talked-about name in a very specific corner of the financial world. She had bought the red dress herself, had chosen it because it made her feel like she owned every room she walked into, and she was not about to let a handful of women whose only accomplishment was marrying well convince her otherwise. She did not notice him until she was 3 steps from the bar. He stood near the far wall, alone, a glass of something amber untouched in his hand, and everything about him seemed carved out of a stillness the rest of the room did not possess. His suit was black, cut with a precision that made every other man's tuxedo in the room look borrowed. His eyes, when they lifted and found hers across the space, were dark and unreadable, and there was ink visible at his wrist where his cuff had shifted, deliberate lines disappearing beneath the fabric like a secret the suit was only barely containing. He was watching her the way no one else in the room had watched her all night, not assessing her size, not measuring her against some standard she had never agreed to be judged by. Watching her the way a man watches something he has decided is worth his attention. Talia held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds before she made herself look away, because she had learned a long time ago that attention from beautiful, dangerous-looking men rarely came without a cost attached. She did not know his name yet. She did not know that the man watching her from across the ballroom was Ren Takahashi, and that his family's name carried more weight in 3 cities than any conglomerate she had ever audited. She only knew that when he finally crossed the room toward her, the crowd parted around him in a way that had nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with instinct, the same instinct that makes a room go quiet when something dangerous walks into it. "You handled that well," he said, stopping close enough that she could smell him now, cedar and something like smoke beneath it, nothing about him accidental. "Most people don't recover that fast. Most people haven't spent 14 months listening to men twice their size try to talk down to them in depositions," Talia said. "A gala full of gossiping wives isn't exactly intimidating after that." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, something more controlled than that. "What's your name?" he asked. "Talia Reeves," she said. "And you are?" "Someone who noticed you were the only interesting person in this room the moment you walked in," he said, which was not an answer, and she noted that immediately, filed it away the way she filed away every inconsistency in every ledger she had ever audited. She did not know yet that giving him her name was the first move in a game she had not agreed to play. She only knew that for the first time all night, she felt seen instead of measured, and that feeling, dangerous as it might prove to be, was worth staying in the conversation a little longer to understand. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes, longer than Talia usually gave any stranger at an event like this, and by the time the conversation moved from her work to his, careful and vague as his answers stayed, she had already decided he was not simply another wealthy man playing at charm for the night. "You're deflecting every question about what you actually do," she said, direct in the way that had made her excellent at her job and occasionally difficult in every other room she entered. "That's usually a sign someone has something to hide." "Or a sign I've learned not to discuss business at parties," he said. "Everyone in this room already knows what I do. I'd rather talk about something more interesting." "Which is?" "You," he said, Simply no performance in it, which somehow made it land harder than if he had tried to charm her with a line. Before she could respond, a commotion rippled through the crowd near the entrance, security moving with sudden purpose, voices dropping into the particular urgency of people who had just realized something had gone wrong. Ren's entire posture changed in an instant, the easy stillness she had noticed across the room sharpening into something coiled and alert, his hand finding her elbow with a grip that was gentle but immovable. "Stay close to me," he said, low, no explanation offered, and something in his voice told her this was not a request she had the option to refuse. The lights cut a moment later, plunging the ballroom into darkness broken only by the ambient glow of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the screaming started almost immediately, a wave of panic rippling through several hundred people who had come dressed for celebration and found themselves suddenly trapped in chaos. Talia felt Ren's arm come around her, guiding her firmly toward a service corridor at the edge of the room rather than the main exit where the crowd was surging, and she understood, moving fast beside him through the dark, that he knew exactly where he was going, that this was not his first time navigating a building under threat. "Who's doing this?" she asked, breathless, keeping pace with him despite her heels. "People who want something from me and think tonight is a good night to get it," he said. "I need you to trust me for the next 5 minutes.
Can you do that?" She did not know him.
She had known him for 20 minutes and a handful of careful sentences. But something in the calm certainty of his voice, entirely at odds with the panic surrounding them, made her nod even though he could not see it in the dark. "Yes," she said. He led her through a service door into a stairwell, moving with the kind of precision that told her every step had been calculated, and it was there, 3 flights down, that 2 men in dark clothing appeared at the base of the stairs, weapons visible even in the dim emergency lighting. Ren moved before Talia fully registered what was happening, closing the distance between himself and the first man with a speed that seemed impossible for someone who had spent the last 20 minutes standing so perfectly still. He disarmed the man in a single fluid motion, twisting the weapon free and driving him back against the wall hard enough that the second man hesitated, just for a half-second, just long enough for Talia to act. She grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted beside the stairwell door and swung it directly into the second man's raised arm, the weapon clattering down the stairs, and Rin finished the confrontation in the seconds that followed while she stood there, heart hammering, understanding for the first time exactly what kind of man she had spent the evening talking to. "You didn't run," he said afterward, studying her in the emergency lighting, something unreadable behind his dark eyes. "Running wasn't going to help either of us," she said. "I did the math. Fire extinguisher was faster than my legs in these heels." Something that might have been the beginning of a real smile crossed his face, gone as quickly as it arrived. "Most people freeze," he said. "You didn't." "I told you," Talia said. "I've survived worse than a gala full of judgmental women. Apparently I can survive this too." Rin did not let her go home that night. He explained it plainly once they reached the street level, his car already waiting, his driver's face carefully blank in the way of a man trained never to react to chaos. "Whoever planned that tonight knew I would be there," he said, once they were moving through the city, the gala and its screaming crowd falling away behind them. "Which means they likely know who I spoke to for 20 minutes before the lights went out. I'm not willing to gamble on whether that makes you a target too." "So what? I'm supposed to just disappear into whatever safe house you've got lined up," Talia said, arms crossed, refusing to let the fear she felt translate into anything but irritation. "For tonight, yes," he said. "Tomorrow you can go back to being furious with me. Tonight, you stay where I can make sure you're breathing." She stayed. Not because she trusted him completely, but because the alternative, going back to her apartment alone after watching a man dismantle 2 armed attackers in a stairwell, felt considerably less safe than anywhere he might take her. The house he brought her to sat on a quiet street she did not recognize, unassuming from the outside, reinforced in ways she would not fully understand until days later. He gave her a room, showed her where the kitchen was, and disappeared for nearly an hour making calls in a language she assumed was Japanese, his voice dropping into something clipped and controlled that told her, even without understanding the words, exactly how serious the situation had become. She found him afterwards standing at the window of the front room, still in his suit though his tie had come loose, staring out at a street that gave nothing away. "You're not going to tell me what you actually do," she said, joining him at the window. "Are you?" "I run an organization my father built, and his father before him," Rin said, without turning to look at her. "We move things through this city that most people never think about. Money. Information. Sometimes people who need to disappear for reasons of their own. I'm not going to dress it up as something gentler than it is." "You're telling me you're some kind of crime boss," Talia said, testing the shape of the words in her own mouth. "I'm telling you that my family has controlled parts of 3 cities for generations," he said. "And I'm telling you that tonight happened because someone believes taking something from me, even something as small as 20 minutes of your time, sends a message they think I'll understand." Talia felt her pulse climb, not entirely from fear. "And do you understand it?" "I understand that I should have left you alone the moment I noticed you across that ballroom," he said, finally turning to face her. "I understand that instead I crossed the room because for the first time in longer than I can remember, someone in a room full of people who wanted something from me wanted nothing at all. That mattered more than it should have." The confession sat heavy between them, more honest than anything she had expected from a man who had spent the entire evening speaking in careful, guarded sentences. She studied him, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands, so precise and lethal an hour earlier, now rested loosely at his sides like he did not quite know what to do with them in front of her. "My grandmother used to tell me that the people who show you exactly what they are, the first time, are the ones worth listening to," Talia said. "Most men spend months hiding what you just told me in one conversation." "Does that frighten you?" he asked. "Terrifies me," she said honestly. "But I've never been the kind of woman who runs just because something scares her." Something moved behind his eyes then, something that looked almost like relief, like he had expected her to bolt for the door the moment he told her the truth and had braced himself for it without fully wanting it to happen. He did not move toward her. He simply held her gaze, steady, the space between them charged with something neither of them was ready to name yet. "Get some rest," he said finally, stepping back, the careful control returning to his voice. "Tomorrow we figure out who did this and why." She went to bed that night thinking not about the attack, or the danger, or the impossible situation she had walked into wearing a dress meant for celebration. She thought about the way he had said "terrifies me" back to her without flinching, like her fear was something to be respected rather than dismissed, and she understood, lying awake in an unfamiliar room, that whatever this was becoming, it had already gone too far to undo simply by walking away in the morning. She stayed in Ren's house for 4 days, and in that time she learned more about the architecture of his world than she had ever expected to know about anyone. She learned his lieutenant, a careful, watchful man named Hiro, had served the Takahashi family for over a decade and treated her with a courtesy that suggested Ren's protection extended further than she initially understood. She learned Ren rarely raised his voice, that he did not need to, that a single flat sentence from him could empty a room of grown men faster than any shouting ever could. She also learned, from Hiro, over coffee she had not asked for but drank anyway, exactly why Ren carried himself with the particular careful stillness she had noticed the moment she saw him across the ballroom. "There was a woman once," Hiro said carefully, choosing his words with the precision of someone who understood he was crossing into territory Ren rarely allowed anyone to discuss. "Aiko." She worked alongside him for years, someone he trusted with things he trusted almost no one else with. A rival family targeted her to reach him, and he was one step too slow. He has never forgiven himself for that step. It is why he keeps everyone at a distance now. It is why what happened at that gala, the fact that he crossed the room for you at all, means more than you understand. Talia carried that knowledge carefully after that, understanding suddenly why Ren watched every door, why his hands stayed so precisely still until the moment they were not, why tenderness, when it surfaced in him at all, arrived like something he had to fight his own instincts to allow. On the 4th night, going through the shipping manifests Ren had left open on the kitchen table, hoping to make herself useful in a world where she otherwise felt entirely out of her depth, Talia's trained eye caught something wrong in the numbers, the same instinct that had made her exceptional at her job for years now working in Ren's favor instead. A pattern of falsified cargo weights tied to a rival organization, the Kuroda family, whose name she had heard mentioned twice in low, careful tones since arriving. She brought the discrepancy to Ren immediately, spreading the manifests across his desk, walking him through the numbers the way she would have walked a judge through evidence. The weights don't match the fuel consumption logs, she said. Whoever is falsifying these shipments is moving something heavier than declared, consistently, on routes that all originate from Kuroda-controlled docks. If I had to guess, I'd say weapons. This is exactly the kind of discrepancy that got me my last case. Ren studied the pages for a long moment, his jaw tightening as the pieces settled into place. This confirms it, he said. Kuroda didn't send those men to the Gala for money or territory. He sent them because he's escalating towards something larger, and he wanted to see how I'd respond to a direct provocation before he moved further. So what happens now? Talia asked. Now I have to decide whether to strike first, or wait for him to make the next move, Ren said, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw genuine uncertainty behind his controlled exterior, a man weighing a decision that could cost lives either way. You already know what you're going to do, Talia said quietly. You're just deciding whether you're willing to let me stand beside you while you do it. He looked up at her, something raw passing behind his dark eyes. I told myself staying detached was survival, he said. After I go, I built my entire life around never letting anyone close enough to become a liability again. I was lying to myself. Watching you across that ballroom, I understood immediately that whatever I'd built to protect myself was already failing. It was not a declaration of love. It was more dangerous than that, an honest confession from a man who rarely allowed himself honesty at all, and Talia felt the weight of it settle into her chest with a certainty that frightened her more than the armed men in the stairwell had. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Not because you need protecting, because I choose to be here. He crossed the space between them then, slow and deliberate, and when his hand finally came up to trace the line of her jaw, careful in the way everything about him was careful, she did not pull away. She leaned into it instead, understanding that whatever came next, war or peace, danger or safety, she had already made her choice the moment she refused to run in that stairwell. The Kuroda situation escalated within 2 days, faster than either of them had anticipated. Hiro brought word that Kuroda had requested a formal sit-down, the kind of meeting that traditionally settled disputes between families without further bloodshed, though nobody in Ren's house believed for a moment that Kuroda intended this meeting to end peacefully. It's a trap, Hiro said flatly, during the planning that filled the front room that evening. He wants Ren in a room he controls, surrounded by his own men. This isn't diplomacy. This is an execution wearing diplomacy's clothes. Then we don't let him control the room, Talia said, drawing every eye in the space toward her. Ren's expression shifted, wary and protective at once. You are not coming to this meeting. I have to, she said. I'm the one who found the falsified manifests. I can walk in there as your auditor, someone reviewing the shipping discrepancies as a neutral third party, and Kuroda will underestimate exactly what that means. He'll see a woman with a folder of paperwork. He won't see the person who can dismantle his entire operation with the numbers I'm already holding. If anything happens to you in that room, Ren said low, I won't be able to think clearly enough to get either of us out. Then trust me the way I trusted you in that stairwell, Talia said. I didn't run then. I'm not running now. It cost him visibly to agree, but he did, and 3 days later they walked into a private meeting hall on neutral ground, Talia dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that gave away nothing, a leather folder tucked under her arm like the most ordinary business documents in the world. Kuroda sat at the head of a long table, an older man with cold, calculating eyes, flanked by 4 of his own men. He barely acknowledged Talia's presence at first, exactly as she predicted, dismissing her as staff, as nobody worth his attention. It was precisely the mistake she was counting on. When the conversation reached the shipping dispute, the surface reason for the meeting, Talia opened her folder and laid the falsified manifests across the table with the same steady precision she used in every deposition she had ever walked into. These weights don't match your fuel consumption records, she said, meeting Kuroda's eyes directly. Consistently, across 11 shipments, all originating from your controlled docks. I've already flagged the pattern to federal contacts as part of an unrelated audit my firm is conducting. If anything happens to me, or to Mr. Takahashi, in this room or outside it, that information becomes public within 24 hours, along with everything else I've compiled about your operation over the last 3 days. Kuroda's expression flickered, Real's surprise breaking through his composure for the first time. You would risk federal exposure of your own client's business to protect him, he said, gesturing toward Rin. He's not my client, Talia said. He's the reason I'm still breathing after your men tried to kill both of us in a stairwell 4 nights ago. I don't take that lightly, and I don't forgive it either. The room held its breath for a long, dangerous moment, Kuroda weighing the cost of calling her bluff against the certainty in her voice, and Talia did not blink, did not let a single flicker of fear cross her face, though her heart hammered beneath the charcoal jacket. Kuroda backed down, eventually, the way men like him always did when the cost of pushing further outweighed whatever pride demanded. The territorial dispute settled without further bloodshed, Kuroda's falsified shipments becoming a quiet, private leverage point rather than a public scandal, exactly as Talia had calculated. 2 of his lieutenants disappeared from the organization entirely within the month, and Talia understood, without needing to be told directly, that some debts in this world were paid in silence rather than headlines. Rin looked at her afterward, once they were back in the car, the tension of the last hour finally draining from his shoulders, and there was something in his expression she had not seen from him before, unguarded and entirely without calculation. You just ended a war with a folder of paperwork, he said. I told you, Talia said. I've survived worse than gossiping wives at a gala. Turns out that's good practice for surviving everything else too. The weeks that followed settled into something Talia had not expected to find on the other side of that gala night. She kept her job, refused every quiet suggestion from Ren that she might want to step back from work that put her in courtrooms and depositions, because she had built her career with her own 2 hands and had no intention of letting anything, even him, erase that. He, in turn, stopped pretending the danger of his world could be hidden from her, brought her into rooms she once would never have been allowed near, trusted her judgment on matters that had nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with the particular way she read people. Hiro told her once, months into it, that he had never seen Rin bring anyone this close to the actual machinery of the family's business, not in all the years he had served him. He built walls after Aiko that nobody else has managed to get past, Hiro said. You didn't get past them. He took them down himself. That is different, and it matters more than you may realize. Talia thought about that conversation on the evening Rin finally brought her back to a gala, 6 months after the first one, the same ballroom, though this time she walked in on his arm rather than alone. She wore green this time, not red, a deep emerald that moved like water when she walked, and when the same cluster of pastel-dressed women turned to watch her enter, their expressions were entirely different than they had been the last time she stood in this room. One of them, the same woman who had mocked her dress months earlier, approached during a lull in the evening, her smile brittle and calculating. You clean up well, she said, the compliment landing more like an accusation. I suppose some men like a woman with more to hold on to. Talia did not flinch. She had spent months learning to read danger far more serious than a jealous woman's insecurity dressed up as small talk. He likes a woman who doesn't need his permission to take up space, she said, calm and even. You should try it sometime. It's remarkably freeing. Rin appeared at her side a moment later, his hand settling at the small of her back with the easy, deliberate familiarity of a man who no longer needed to hide what she meant to him. He said nothing to the woman, did not need to. The particular stillness in his gaze, the unmistakable weight of his attention resting entirely on Talia, said everything that needed saying, and the woman excused herself within seconds, retreating back into her circle of pastel dresses without another word. You didn't have to do that, Talia said, once they were alone again near the windows overlooking the city. I didn't do anything, Rin said. You handled it exactly the way you handled everything else since the night we met. I just happened to be standing close enough to watch." She looked out at the city lights spread beneath them, the same view she remembered from the night everything changed, and she thought about the woman she had been walking into that first gala, chin up and armored against expected cruelty, and the woman she was now, standing in the same room with an entirely different kind of certainty settled into her bones. "I'm not staying because you need protecting," she said, echoing words she had said to him once before, though the meaning had deepened considerably since then. "I'm staying because I choose it. Every single day since that stairwell, I've chosen it." "I know," Rin said, turning to face her fully, his expression open in a way few people in this city would ever be permitted to see. "That's the only reason I've let myself want it." She did not answer him with words this time either. She reached up and settled her hand against the lapel of his jacket, the same deliberate gesture that had marked the moment everything shifted between them, and when their mouths finally met, unhurried and certain, the ballroom around them faded into something distant and unimportant, the way danger and cruelty and every voice that had ever told her she did not belong in a room like this one simply stopped mattering. She had walked into that first gala wearing a red dress and armor she had built herself, expecting nothing from the night beyond survival. She left it, months later, having found something she had never gone looking for, a man who had seen her clearly from across a crowded room and had never once asked her to be smaller than exactly who she already was. That was the only kind of ending this world ever offered people like them. Not a fairy tale softened at the edges. A choice, made in full knowledge of its cost, by a woman who understood precisely what she was choosing and chose it anyway, with her eyes open and her hands steady, standing exactly as tall as she had always been. Later that night, back at the house that had become, somewhere along the way, something closer to home than her own apartment ever had, Talia stood at the same window where Run had once confessed the truth about his family, about Aiko, about the careful distance he had spent years building between himself and everyone around him. The city stretched dark and glittering below, indifferent to the war that had nearly ended before it began, indifferent to the woman who had once been mocked for the shape of her body in a room full of people who mistook cruelty for wit. Ren joined her there, sleeves rolled to his forearms, the particular stillness in his shoulders finally, fully at ease in a way she had rarely seen since the night they met. He did not say anything grand. He simply stood beside her, close enough that his arm brushed hers, and after a long moment of comfortable silence, he spoke. "Hiro told me once that a man in my position should never let anyone see the parts of him that aren't calculated," Rin said. "I spent years believing him. Then a woman in a red dress refused to run from a stairwell, and refused to run from anything after that, and I understood that some rules are only worth keeping until the right person proves you wrong for holding them." "I'm glad I proved you wrong," Talia said. "So am I," he said. "More than I know how to say properly." She turned to face him fully, the city lights catching the sharp lines of his profile, and she understood, standing there in a house that had become hers in every way that mattered, that she had not simply survived the danger of his world. She had claimed a place inside it, built with the same steady competence that had carried her through every courtroom and every audit and every room that had ever underestimated her, and no one, not Kuroda, not the women in pastel dresses, not the version of herself who had once wondered if she deserved to take up space at all, would ever convince her to make herself smaller again. Somewhere across the city, the gala they had left behind was likely still glittering on without them, the same pastel dresses circling the same shallow conversations, entirely unaware that the woman they had mocked months ago had walked out of their world and built something far more permanent than any of them could imagine, standing beside a man whose name alone could silence a room, in a life she had chosen with her eyes wide open. Talia thought about that sometimes, the strange arithmetic of it all, how one cruel comment tossed carelessly across a ballroom had set into motion everything that followed. She did not think of it with bitterness. She thought of it the way she thought of every difficult case she had ever closed, as proof that the truth, however long it took to surface, always found its way to the people paying close enough attention to see it. There was one more thing Talia carried with her from that night, something she never explained fully to anyone, not even Ren. It was the memory of the exact moment she decided not to shrink, standing at the edge of that first ballroom with laughter aimed at her back, choosing instead to smooth her dress and walk forward anyway. Every single thing that followed, the danger, the falsified manifests, the man who had crossed a crowded room because she was the only interesting person in it, all of it had started with that one small, stubborn refusal to make herself smaller for people who had never once earned the right to ask it of her. She kept that memory close, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that the version of herself who refused to disappear that night had known something the rest of the room had not yet learned, that she was always going to be exactly the kind of woman worth crossing a room for. And if anyone ever asked her, in the years that followed, how it all began, she would tell them the truth, plain and unpolished. It began with a red dress, a room full of people who underestimated her, and a decision, made in the space of a single breath, to stand exactly as tall as she already was. That was the story the city would never fully know, tucked away behind reinforced windows, and a name most people knew better than to say too loudly. But Talia knew it, knew it, and on quiet nights, when the house settled into stillness around them, that was enough.